Hey there, welcome. Thanks for joining me on today. I am so excited to be here on another episode of the Kingdom Wealth Warriors podcast, where we equip kingdom-minded believers with spiritual truths to walk in divine authority, wisdom, and wealth. I am Deb Howard, your abundant life coach. And today we're going to continue our discussion about money trauma. But today we're going to talk about breaking free from financial strongholds that are keeping many believers from walking in financial victory. Yes. So let's get started with this conversation because I want to start by defining what a spiritual stronghold is, or a financial stronghold, right? Spiritual financial stronghold. How about that? So from a spiritual perspective, a financial stronghold can be defined as a deeply ingrained mindset or a belief or an attachment related to money, wealth, or material possessions that hinders an individual's spiritual growth. Right? It's a mindset. It's a belief, right? Previous episode, we talked a little bit about how childhood, how we were raised, can impact our beliefs about money. And I think I asked you to go ahead and write your money story, because we have to know the root, right? We have to identify it before we can fix it or be healed from it. And so when we talk about a financial stronghold, it's that belief or attachment that's related to money, to wealth, or even material possessions that hinders an individual's spiritual growth. It hinders their trust in divine provision, right? It's hard for us to believe sometimes that God is going to come through for us. And it keeps us from being aligned with those higher principles that God, or spiritual principles that God has left for us. So we've been talking a lot about this. We've been talking about alignment, right? We want to be aligned with our assignment from heaven, because this is the place where our financial growth, our overflow, our abundance is going to come from. I think sometimes we forget that our wealth comes from the people that we impact. So if we want more wealth, then that means we need to impact more people, or we need to have a stronger impact on the people that we serve. So we have to, though, before we get to all of that, deal with our beliefs, our understanding about the scriptures. We have to get all of that dealt with before we can even tap in, right, to the wealth, the power that we have to get wealth, which is in our gifts and our talents, etc. All right. Let me not. Y'all know I always want to keep talking. So I'm really trying to stay focused because I want us to get what we need to get. All right. So we're talking about strongholds, right? It often manifests, right? How do you know you have a stronghold? Listen, it manifests, right? And not like you're thinking, right? I'm not talking about manifesting like falling on the floor and foaming out your mouth. Not that kind of manifest. But it manifests in our habits. It manifests in how we manage our money. Because again, it's tied to a belief. It's tied to some mindset, some thinking that's ingrained in us. And so it often manifests as an excessive reliance sometimes on financial security, right? The love of money is the root of all evil. So that excessive attachment, I'm willing to do, and you may have heard people, hopefully just in the movie, say, I'll do anything for money, right? There's an excessive reliance on it because as believers, our reliance is supposed to be on God. Okay. All right. It can manifest in scarcity thinking, in greed, in idolizing wealth, or even idolizing wealthy people. right? Which can cause barriers for us to get to our freedom, whether it's financial or spiritual freedom. It can be a barrier to us operating in kingdom principles. One of those principles is generosity. So if our mindset is not right, then we will forfeit, right, the principles that God has given us in order to get wealth. We'll push that aside, and that causes us to operate in another place. And that's not what we want to do, right? Listen, we want the most abundant life that we can get, that Jesus said that we could have in John 10:10, when he said, I came that you may have life and have it more abundantly. So in many churches and many belief systems, these kind of strongholds, this is a financial one that we're talking about, but there are all kind of strongholds. They can be seen as a form of bondage that really distracts you from living your life on purpose, in faith, and being a person that is generous and serves others, right? This can be a barrier, this stronghold, this belief, right? Either that there's not enough money and therefore every dollar I get, I got to keep, right? Or that I shouldn't have money. Oh, there's so many things. So anyway, let's talk about a few of them now that we have a little bit more of an understanding of a stronghold, right? So one of the things that financial strongholds, how they can manifest, is in fear-based money habits. And we've been talking about that, right? Avoiding investments. If you're an entrepreneur, it can manifest in you undercharging, underpricing yourself, right? Because we are not seeing the value in us. And we don't have the right perspective on money. And so we're willing to take less just to get a little money, We don't understand the power of the exchange of money. And we don't understand the value of what's inside of us. That generational money trauma that I know we've talked a little bit about can cause you, right? Having scarcity thinking, a poverty mindset, these things that sometimes can be established in childhood, especially if you grew up in a low-income home or even a poverty home, right? Sometimes those things can form a stronghold in us and cause us to have issues with self-worth. You may remember we talked about that too. And so if we have an issue with our own self-worth or self-esteem, then I'm not going to believe that I have something that you are willing to pay for. You may be saying this to yourself now. I don't have anything that anyone would pay me for. And you absolutely do. Absolutely. If you have a 9-to-5 job, somebody is paying you for your services. And they didn't just do it because they needed a warm body. They hired you because they recognized, whether in your interview or on your resume or on your application or whatever, that there was something there that we can use, that we believe will benefit this business. So right now, on your 9-to-5, you have one customer. When we're employed, that's all that means. I'm doing this service, whatever you're doing, for this one customer. And sometimes we can't imagine using the skill sets that we have, the skills, the knowledge that we have that we use at work. We can't imagine packaging that information, that skill set, and offering it to more than one customer, to multiple customers, because our self-worth is not there, or we have a bad perspective on our self-worth. And this can be tied to financial strongholds. You may not have thought about it like that before, But when we begin to see holistically that everything is connected, right? Our life is intertwined. And so if there's an area, and in this case, finances, if money, if wealth is an area of opportunity, then it probably sprung from another area, right? The root of that financial difficulty is rooted somewhere. And so today we're talking about that. We're talking about that financial stronghold, what we believe, what our thinking has been, what we've been taught in our faith, in religion. We have to look at all of those things. One thing that I was taught, this was back in the day, so I know church is not still teaching this, but back in the day, one of the things that I was taught about money in church is that we don't need money, that God provides. I was also taught that rich people are evil. You know, they typically would use that scripture that talks about it's harder for a rich man, or it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man enter into the kingdom of heaven. Yeah. And so with that kind of teaching, and that was my faith, why would I want to be wealthy? For me, being wealthy meant I might not make it into the kingdom. So it took me, and that's just an example, right? I have some understanding now. We don't have time to get into it in this episode, but we may in a future episode get into that. But I had to get some understanding and search the scriptures, study for myself, and understand what in the world Jesus was saying. Because he couldn't have been saying that rich men, rich people, wealthy people can't make it into the kingdom. Well, we got too many examples in scripture. Again, we don't have time to go through it today. I don't want to right now because I'm going to get off track. But I'm making this point that what we believe can impact our finances. And it can cause us to have an aversion to wealth based on our belief. And I'm telling you that that's a stronghold. And so that thing has to be uprooted. That thing has to be, your mind has to be renewed. Come on, Romans. And it has to be renewed with the right information. And it has to be renewed by sometimes using affirmations to reprogram your thinking. Because when you have a stronghold, the whole thing, the word itself means stronghold. Like, I'm not going to let you go. So that financial stronghold, that spiritual stronghold that may be ingrained in you, it's not going to just say, oh, bye. No, it's holding on. And many times when we start breaking it up, we find other things, right? Other things that's connected to it. All right. I know I'm talking a lot about that, but other ways we can identify financial strongholds is self-sabotaging patterns, right? If you're a self-saboteur, every time you're about to get ahead, you do something. Sometimes we don't even understand it. You know, I used to be a self-saboteur. Sometimes we don't even understand what we're doing. We just allow fear to reign. Maybe you're about to launch a new product in your business, or maybe you're about to do some new program for your ministry. And all of a sudden you get this feeling. Help us with the feelings. You get this feeling that, oh, I got a bad feeling about that. I'm going to hold back. We got to dig into these things, right? Because we walk by faith, not by sight. And guess what? Not by feeling. I know we get feelings, but our emotions can be deceptive. So we have to walk by faith. We've got to develop that relationship with God so that we know when he's speaking, when he's saying stop, and not the fear, right? Not the stronghold telling us, you're going too far now. Come on back. You can't, no, you can't get to that next level. You can't get to the six figures. You can't get to the mid six figures. You know, people talk about six figures all the time. Listen, we got to get further than 100,000. The value of the dollar, we don't have time for it, but you know what I'm saying. So I need you to make sure that your relationship with God is solid as you are dealing with these financial strongholds, so that you aren't pulling yourself back, so that you're not being a self-saboteur. Right? And we've already talked about the biblical part of it, because the enemy, you know, my favorite scripture is John 10:10, right? My whole business based on John 10:10, that Jesus came that we may have life and have it more abundantly. But let me tell you, the enemy, and sometimes it's the enemy in you, but the enemy uses money trauma to keep believers from that abundant life. These beliefs, these mindsets, these religious traditions, teachings that may have been either misinterpreted by us or not fully developed while the instructor was going forth. All these things are coming to keep you in a low place. So how do we break down those strongholds? I know I didn't talk a whole lot about that. Well, we know that we have to renew our mind. I talked to you already about Romans 12. It's Romans 12:2. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So we have to allow ourselves to receive truth. And that might mean if it's scripture, right? If it's religious interpretation or religious teachings that have you in this place, then you need to go study. Right? You need to go search out the word so that you can renew your mind and be transformed. Transformation comes when we take out the old and renew, right? Renew. Put some new information there and believe it. We need to rebuke lies and replace them with God's truth. This is how we're going to renew our mind. You may need to take on some declarations or some affirmations, whichever word is more comfortable for you, right? Start saying out aloud, I walk in financial abundance. I am a divine wealth carrier. Come on now. You've got to talk to yourself sometime, because remember, what we're doing is renewing our thinking, renewing our mind. We want to create new habits, and we want to surround ourselves with people that are going in the direction that we're going. Listen, if you have an opportunity with your finances, then you need to get around people who are abundant, who are living an abundant life, right? Who are wealthy, who have the right mindset, who are going in the direction that you are going. Not people that are pulling you back, but that are pushing you forward, and better yet, that you trying to catch up with. How about that? Oh, man. So we want to surround ourselves with wise people. Proverbs 13:20 tells us to walk with the wise and become wise. Come on now. So you even listening to this podcast, this live right now, you are taking in wisdom from someone who has walked through and made plenty of mistakes and is on the other side of some of those mistakes, right? I could tell you some stories. And I want to end this by saying, because I can tell you some stories, forgive yourself. Listen, you might be reflecting right now on all the things that you've done or not done when it comes to finances. Listen, I did. And I made a lot of mistakes. A lot. But I had to come to the place that not only am I forgiving others for what they didn't know, right? Because it's nobody's fault. Don't get into the blame game. It's nobody's fault. All right. Regardless of who told you what, it's nobody's fault. All right. People give you what they have. And so even when I talk about teachings, religious teachings or traditions or money trauma from the family, etc., they gave you what they had. Most of the time, they didn't know another way. So I want you to forgive yourself. I want you to release the guilt and shame. I know it can be shameful. I know you can feel embarrassment. I have felt plenty of embarrassment over my financial situation. There's one particular time years ago. I remember I was just starting to progress in my career. Right, I had a pretty decent job at a particular company, and there was a training in another state. I had never traveled up to that point. Listen, y'all, that's a story for another day, but I was good and grown before I ever had been on a flight or, been out of the city, or out of state. I hadn't, oh my gosh. Anyway, that's another story. But let me share this with you. I remember the company, of course, was going to cover the travel, etc. I had to make a reservation at a hotel. And the hotel wanted a credit card just to hold, right, for incidentals. I remember that. I didn't have a credit card. Yeah, I didn't have a credit card. At that time, my credit was pretty bad. And it was from mistakes early on, but it was bad. And so I didn't have a credit card. And this was before debit cards were widely used as they are now, right? Only certain places would take a debit card. I know I'm dating myself, but somebody out there might recall that there was a time when, most places, rental car places, hotels didn't take debit cards. Or if they did, there was a huge hold that they put on a chunk of your money. So I remember the embarrassment. I was trying to figure it out. And even the company I kept at that time, look, nobody had a card that I could use. Nobody, my parents, nobody. So I had to come up going to my boss. And when I tell you that was the most embarrassing situation in my life. I shouldn't say that, but it was definitely in the top 5. It was definitely up there. When I had to say, I can't make a hotel arrangement. I can't, get a rental car because I don't have a credit card. I had tried to convince them to let me drive before I before I confessed that this is why I wanted to drive. I'd rather drive. And I was scared of flying because I had never flown. But no, you got to fly. So I'm at the place that I'm having to confess. I don't have any credit. Blah, 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 blah. Now, we worked it out, of course. My boss was very gracious. And I say that to say that I carried that so long, even at that company. I was ashamed because I felt like I've opened up to someone that I really didn't want to open up to about something so personal. So I said that to say that I understand. I understand how embarrassing it can be. I understand the guilt associated with it. I understand that, this is not a reflection of who you are as a person. You're not lower than everybody else. I felt that way. I really did at one point. But you're not. So I really want you to forgive yourself for any past mistakes. Because number one, you can't do anything about it. And I want you to embrace where you are today. You may not be where you want to be. Things may not be perfect. But you can start today, right? You can change your future, right? What's that scripture? Your ladder can be greater. So I really want you to do that. Forgive yourself. Release that guilt and shame. It's just a tool for the enemy to keep you in bondage, to keep you in that financial stronghold. So release that, right? And start celebrating those small wins. Commit yourself, right, to studying the scriptures, understanding what wealth is, financial literacy, all the things, right? Commit yourself to doing that, making a change, not only for you, but for the generations after you, for your children and your children's children. Listen, that's an inheritance in itself. Scripture tells us a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. Well, this is a great inheritance. Stewardship, learning to manage finances, understanding wealth, and how to generate wealth in your life. Listen, thanks for joining me on today. I know I've been long-winded this week. Thanks for joining me on today. My thing back there is almost out of sand. That sand thing back there, it's 30 minutes. So yeah, I've been on quite a while. I want to say that I'm thankful. I'm going to say this. I'm thankful for the journey that I've taken. If what I'm saying and what I'm doing can be a blessing to you. So listen, join me on my next episode where we're going to be talking about, of course, financial healing and living in God's abundance. Until then, you already know what I'm going to say. Go have your most abundant day. I will see you soon.